But we begin tonight with breaking news out of Washington, the dramatic end to a days-long standoff in the United States Senate. A standoff between senators hoping to extend unemployment benefits to hundreds of thousands of Americans and one lone Republican senator standing in their way. Tonight, Republican Senator Jim Bunning of Kentucky, who turned himself into a one-man roadblock, has finally caved. Mr. Bunning agreed to lift his solo objection to a benefits bill that the Senate has been attempting to pass for days now. Senator Bunning's 5-day objection forced thousands of federal workers to go without pay and put on ice hundreds of thousands of Americans who are getting unemployment benefits. Senator Bunning's decision to finally relent to allow that bill to go forward when an amendment of his was allowed to be voted on. That amendment was defeated. This ends a very strange chapter in what has been a very strange career for Senator Bunning. It is not possible to report accurately on what's been a very bizarre turn of events in the Senate without also explaining that Senator Bunning has a history of bizarre behavior. Behavior that's not just politically strong-willed, that's not just him having extreme opinions on issues, but rather, we mean literally strange behavior to the point where even his hometown newspaper has at times questioned his mental fitness, saying, quote, "Is his increasing belligerence an indication of something worse? Has he drifted into territory that indicates a serious health concern?" That was from 2004 when Jim Bunning faced a tough re-election battle in Kentucky. It was a race that tightened late due in part to Mr. Bunning's increasingly erratic behavior. For example, during that campaign, Senator Bunning's security detail became a campaign issue. Salon.com reported at the time, quote, "The former Major League Baseball star now travels the bluegrass state with a special police escort at taxpayer expense. His explanation? Al-Qaeda may be out to get him." When questioned by a local TV station, Senator Bunning reportedly warned, quote, "There may be strangers among us." During that same campaign, Senator Bunning refused to debate his opponent unless certain ground rules were agreed to. Among the ground rules, the debate could not be aired live. It had to be held in the afternoon, not in the evening. No audience was allowed to attend, and his opponent was barred from using any clips of the debate in his campaign ads. After setting all of those rules, Mr. Bunning then randomly skipped town and took part in the debate via satellite from RNC headquarters in Washington, D.C., where to some it appeared that he at times was reading off a teleprompter. At another point during the campaign, Senator Bunning went after his opponent in that race by saying that the man looked like one of Saddam Hussein's sons. Senator Bunning had to apologize for that ultimately. A 2004 re-election effort may have been the height of Jim Bunning's kookiness, but it was not the end of it. Last February, Jim Bunning was again forced to apologize after predicting the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Senator Bunning told a group of Kentucky Republicans, quote, "Ruth Bader Ginsburg has cancer, bad cancer, the kind you don't get better from. Even though she was operated on, usually 9 months is the longest that anybody would live." Mr. Bunning's subsequent written apology, it should be noted, misspelled Justice Ginsburg's name twice. During this latest controversy, Senator Bunning angrily swore at other senators on the floor of the Senate when he was asked to drop his objection to the unemployment bill. He yelled out, "Tough thing that sounds like snit." Yesterday, Senator Bunning unloaded on a group of reporters when they tried to question him as he was getting into an elevator. I don't bring this stuff up out of prurient interest in his mental health. I think it is germane to understanding Jim Bunning's odd behavior this week. Senator Bunning has in the past behaved oddly. It's just a fact. It's the record. Now he maintains that this instance of what he's done this week in the Senate is not just another instance of bizarre behavior. He says rather that he is standing on principle.
We cannot keep adding to the debt. It's over $14 trillion and going up fast. If we can't find $10 billion to pay for something that we all support, we will never pay for anything on the floor of this U.S. Senate.
Mr. Bunning claims that he is standing on principle right now, that he won't support anything that wasn't paid for, that he won't support anything that would add to the national debt. except for all of the things that Jim Bunning has voted for in just the last few years that have heaped billions of dollars onto the national debt that he didn't bat an eye about voting for. Like, for example, the 2008 war supplemental bill that he voted for, which wasn't paid for, and which, like this legislation, extended unemployment benefits for out-of-work Americans. Or the 2003 extension of unemployment benefits that weren't paid for, but which Senator Bunning voted for anyway. Mr. Bunning was actually quite proud of that vote. He put out this press release the next day that said, "Bunning touts extended benefits for Kentucky's unemployed." Senator Bunning apparently had no concerns then that the benefits he had just voted for weren't paid for. In 2001, Senator Bunning voted for the first round of Bush tax cuts that weren't paid for. 2 years later, he voted for a second round of Bush tax cuts that weren't paid for. That same year, he voted for the Medicare Part D prescription drug benefit that, you guessed it, wasn't paid for. And if Senator Bunning is truly concerned about the Senate paying for things that they pass, if he really is standing on a principle that's actually his principle here, then you would think he would have voted in favor of the Senate adopting pay-go rules, pay-as-you-go rules, earlier this year. Those are the rules that state that everything has to be paid for. But alas, Mr. Bunning voted no on that, too. This was not a matter of principle here. Or if it was, it's a brand new principle that Jim Bunning had never met before this week. The supposed principle of Jim Bunning's that you have to pay for everything that you vote for is not something that has governed his behavior in the past. It does not explain what he has just done. But whatever he's just done, and whatever explains it, it has brought out some politically embarrassing truths about what some of his colleagues believe about people who've fallen on hard times in this bad economy. Republican Senator John Kyle, for example, has distinguished himself this week by defending Jim Bunning's decision to block unemployment benefits on the substance.
If anything, continuing to pay people unemployment compensation is a disincentive for them to seek new work.
You know, those lousy unemployed people lazing around, loving being unemployed. Jim Bunning, you're a hero for cutting them off without any rational explanation whatsoever. The Jim Bunning standoff in the United States Senate has ended now. But it has been an important reminder about not only where Jim Bunning's coming from, but who's standing right there with him, too. Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation. Chris, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course, Rachel. Good to be here.
Can we tell why Senator Bunning decided to cave on this tonight?
Well, basically what happened was that Harry Reid leaked a roll call earlier today that they were going to basically go through and make him actually filibuster. Now, this is something people always want Democrats to make Republicans do, and what made this different was that it looked like Bunning was basically on his own. He might have had demand, but he would have had to talk the whole time, and the moment that he got up to leave the chamber, if someone didn't stand in for him, they would have been able to get unanimous consent. So basically, the Democratic leadership called his bluff, is the short answer.
Well, what do you think the impact of this is going to be? Obviously, now that they have beaten him tonight, that this is over now tonight, what the immediate impact is that people who have not been getting their unemployment benefit extension will get them. The furloughs will presumably be over. The construction projects will start back up again. All of the other people who were really financially hurt by this will hopefully be made whole in terms of their finances. But politically, what's going to be the impact of this? Does this get chalked up as Senate gridlock, or does this just get chalked up as, you know, whoa, Jim Bunning's a weird guy?
Well, both of those. I mean, people on the internet today have been documenting fastidiously that all the ways that the press has reported on this as Senate gridlock, which of course exculpates Jim Bunning and also the Republican Party from what they did, which is essentially make sure that people didn't get their unemployment checks. But the entire incident should stand as the reductio ad absurdum of the procedural mishigas of the United States Senate. Because look, Jim Bunning's amendment just failed 53-43. I mean, if we had majority rule in this body, Jim Bunning could have said, hey, I want this amendment to pay for it out of stimulus funds, which in my personal opinion is a terrible idea. But maybe he could have gotten that passed. But of course, because we have the filibuster, he said, well, my amendment isn't going to pass because it can't get 60 votes, so I'm going to hold everything up. It's no way to run a legislative body. So this kind of mini crisis should be an object lesson in just what's wrong with the U.S. Senate and the Tarantino that dominates it.
Thank you for using the Tarantino in a sentence. God bless you. On the issue of the Senate being the problem rather than just being the Senate being the venue in which problems are discussed, the president president tomorrow is going to be talking about health reform, and presumably he's going to be talking a little bit about health policy. But mostly what he's going to be talking about, what people are excited to be hearing about, is how health reform is going to get through the broken U.S. Senate. Do you expect that this Bunning incident is going to be one of the exhibits that the president uses to talk about how things are broken?
Well, it should be. I mean, for all the reasons I just said. For some reason, they're extremely reticent about calling anyone out. They always kind of have this vague hand-waving about obstacles or, you know, procedural impediments or something. So I'd be very, very surprised if the president actually made explicit reference to this. But I think he should, because it really does show just how broken things are. If one obstinate, somewhat batty senator can stop people from getting their unemployment checks, just think about how hard it is just to pass health care legislation. And I think that's part of the argument, right? That if Jim Bunning can do this to something entirely non-controversial, then there's no way to actually get this through unless we just get an up or down vote.
Chris, John Kyle's comments seem important to me here, because it's not. John Kyle weighed in not just by saying, as Jeff Sessions and John Cornyn did, that they think Jim Bunning is a brave guy. He actually weighed in on the substance and said that you know, unemployment benefits are a bad idea because they're a disincentive for people working, which strikes me as, you know,